Hi. So I'm really thrilled to be at the Metaphysical Center because I don't often get to talk to an audience that comes from a metaphysical perspective. And I am definitely, I've often called myself a modern-day mystic, and imagine many in here have used similar terms. So it's really exciting to be able to share that part of myself. And I'd like to invite everyone to join me by starting just with a few deep breaths in silence. And I'd like to call in the heart of each and every one here to open to the connection that we already share, that you and I share, that we share with everyone here, with all beings. I'd like to invite in any guiding spirits, guardian angels, to be here fully communicating with us and opening to whatever is best for each one of us and for all of us and for all beings in this time together. I'd like to give gratitude. Gratitude for all the countless blessings and miracles in my life, and gratitude for these miracles and blessings right in front of me and everything that's been in your lives. Invite everyone just to find a place where you have some gratitude inside of you and take a deep breath and breathe it in right now. So, one of the things I want to do is be really open and transparent and vulnerable with you tonight. So I'm going to share some of my process of what's going on. I decided, because this is a metaphysical center and I'm really excited about this, to really open, not plan out what I was going to say at all, to tap into your energy and just flow and see where we end up going on this journey together. There's so much we could talk about. I'm sure any one of you I could sit down and we could talk for hours and be fascinated. So what's coming to me right now is starting out with the website that is dearest to my heart of the several websites that I manage right now, and it's called the Web of Love at weboflove.org. And the basic principle behind the Web of Love is a metaphysical principle which I was just mentioning. It's simply that every person on this planet has a heart. And every person has a place in their heart that wants only to love and be loved. No matter how twisted, no matter how far they may have suppressed that part of themselves, doesn't matter whether it's Bush or Cheney or whoever you want to call the most evil man on the planet or woman, they have hearts. And they have a place inside that when they were babies, they just wanted to love and be loved. And they ended up where they are now. So the Web of Love is an invitation to remember that. To remember that every being on this planet has a place that just wants to love and be loved. And that when we choose to support that place with our own energy, to allow us ourselves to see deeper than the mask which covers up all of the pain and suffering and craziness that goes on inside so many people, we can and will transform this planet. So there's a very basic, simple exercise on the Web of Love, which I'm going to invite you to join me in for just a minute. And it has to do with breath. Two of the most important tools that I've found in my life that have brought countless miracles are breath and intention. And awareness of the breath and how I'm using my breath has really brought some powerful openings and expansions in my life. For those of you who are scientists, you may recognize the number 6.023 times 10 to the 23rd. Anybody remember that? Chemistry? What is it, 1 joule? Is that what? I forget what the term is. But that's how many molecules there are in 1 cubic liter of air. It's something like 6 trillion molecules. So over the course of this night, you and I are going to exchange molecules of air probably on the order of several billion. With every person in this room, you're exchanging several billion molecules of air that they have breathed, that's going into your breath and out to others. And these molecules that we're breathing right now will go out into the atmosphere and be spread around, and within years, they're going to spread across the whole country. And people on the other side of the country in one breath will probably breathe several of the molecules that you breathe even tonight. Isn't that bizarre? What a concept. And you ever stop to think that the air doesn't disappear? It does. When you burn oxygen, of course, it can transform, but most of it stays there. And that you're probably breathing the same air that Jesus breathed, that the Buddha breathed. Whoever your spiritual leader is, or whoever you put up on a pedestal in any way, you're breathing some of the molecules that they breathed. But guess what? You're also breathing molecules that Hitler breathed, that George Bush breathes, Dick Cheney. It's all there. It's all mixed together in every breath you take. And I use that just as an example of how we're much more interconnected than you might think. So the simple exercise on the web of love is just an in-breath and an out-breath meditation. I call it my mantra. The in-breath is, your sacred love flows into me. So saying that silently to yourself as you take a big deep breath. Your sacred love flows into me. The out-breath, my sacred love flows out to you. And you might start, just think for a moment, who is it that's most dear to you in your life? Let that person just come to your mind right now. Who's the most close to your heart? And just take a moment with your eyes closed, maybe just imagine that person and breathe that in. Your sacred love flows into me. Big, full, deep breath. And the out breath, my sacred love flows out to you. Now that you can be actually anybody. I recommend starting with somebody you feel close to, because of course it's much easier to feel the love there. But you can expand it outwards to your whole family, to all of your friends. The you can be singular or plural, which is not true in many languages. It's easier in English to do this one. And let's just take a moment now, recognizing that everybody in here has a beautiful heart, or at least a place in their hearts that's very beautiful, and that we can breathe the love in. So from this whole room, let's just take a moment to breathe the sacred love in and out. Thank you. Unless you've seen my website, you probably didn't quite expect this White House insider to start out with something like that. So, there's many things I'm passionate about in my life, but that is one of the things I'm most passionate about, is being a reminder, being an invitation that every being on this planet has that divine spark in them, that we're all manifestations of the divine. And that is my biggest perspective in all the work that I do. And guess what? That web of love has been in the White House with George Bush and Bill Clinton. And that web of love has been in many other places of power. And I never tried to become a White House interpreter. I was put there, and I'll tell you that story briefly. But once I was there, I knew I was there. It's like, of course, you know, that's what I'm here to do, and I've been here to do that for a while. And so When I'm with those world leaders, at the highest level, there's always two interpreters, one from their country and one from ours. And whenever their interpreter is going, when I'm interpreting, I have to stay focused, and I can't do it then, although it's always there energetically. But when their interpreter is going, I literally close my eyes and just do that. Feel the web of love, breathe it in, and breathe it out with the people there. Inviting them to open to joining us in working towards what's best for all of us, what's best for all beings. That's the invitation that goes out as I do this in those meetings. And believe it or not, I used to be very shy about telling people that I was a presidential interpreter, because I remember what I did when my boss at the State Department told me he had interpreted for Nixon in China. I put him up on this pedestal. It's like, wow, you interpreted for Nixon in China? At that time, I was just the low level. There's 3 levels of interpreter, and I was just the lowest level. But he was a really cool guy, and we talked. It's like, and I remember putting him up on that pedestal. My own deepest core issue is arrogance. Core issue work is very powerful. I hope to remember to touch on that in a bit. When I was a kid, I thought I was better than everybody on this planet. I was really arrogant. There's good reason for it. I had some very difficult training from my father when I was 2 that helped me to take on his arrogance and try to top it. So arrogance is something I'm always, I tell people the core issue is like a big onion with layers and layers and layers and layers. And when you choose to be conscious and to open to your spiritual center and to grow, you start working through those layers. Every time I make it through a layer of that arrogance and have a new realization, a new breakthrough, like, wow, this is great. I'm doing it. I remember the first few times I thought the onion was gone. But then a few months later, like, oh, there it is, but in a more subtle form. And gradually I learned that it's not gone every time I have a breakthrough. It's these layers and layers. And it used to be like this, and now it's maybe like this. Very easy and manageable. It's still there. But it's so wonderful. So for many years, I didn't tell anybody I was interpreting for the president. In fact, I didn't tell my own mother, because I really didn't want him to put me on that pedestal. And then eventually I finally realized at my 40th birthday, I said, you know, if I was somebody outside looking at me, I would want to know these stories. I would want to, it's not about putting somebody on a pedestal, like I'd want to be excited and hear about this. And so I finally got to a place where my overreaction to my arrogance stepped aside and I could share it with people. And then what happened is that as I got into these websites, and we'll go into it more later, I actually developed a mailing list where people would subscribe to my email list, which all of you can do, by the way, by going to any one of the websites and clicking subscribe. And so at the last time I interpreted for the president was, I think, October in 2004 in Bali. George Bush was doing a 4-hour stopover in Bali to meet with President Megawati Soekarno-Putri of Indonesia and several other leaders there. By that time, I don't remember, I must have had somewhere between 600 and 1,000 subscribers on, to my lists. And so I had already done it several times, so this is the biggest one. I sent out to my list, I'm going to be meeting with these 2 presidents, these 2 world leaders, and several others. Condoleezza Rice was there, and several other top people, Andrew Card. And so I can't tell you the place because that's classified, but I can tell you the time. And I'm going to invite every one of you to join me at that time and focus on sending your energy and allowing it to channel through me and all of this so that we can all bombard them with love and bombard them with an invitation to open and expand and work towards what's best. So because actually many of the people on the list mailed it out to many others and actually spread quite a bit. There were at least several thousand who joined me that last time in October 2004 before I resigned. So you might think, well, what's Bush? Look at him now. Did it do any good? Well, guess what? I actually believe that we're all on the same side and that Bush is playing a very vitally important role. And he's pushing it so far that way that we can't help but rebound. And I think he even knows that, at least semi-consciously. But I'll just tell you a little story that surprises people. So I'd met Bush a couple times before. I haven't interpreted for him a lot because they don't often need Indonesian interpreters. I did become the #1 Indonesian interpreter by the time I resigned, so I was the one they called on. But I think in person I only interpreted for Bush 3 times and another 3 or 4 times on the telephone. So this was our 3rd meeting, and this was the longest. The first one, by the way, was 8 days after 9/11. I was in the White House, and that was very interesting. There's many stories. But so, because it's a metaphysical center, I got to tell this little piece. I woke up the morning of that 4-hour meeting, and by the way, it was a hotel. There's 500 people. When I got there 3 days early, I always go ahead, and then the president flies in and meet him there. 500 people working feverishly to set up 4 hours worth of meetings. You have no idea the amount of energy and effort that goes into everything that's in the president's schedule every day. And you think the president has a lot of power? Every morning he gets handed his schedule and says, this is what you're doing today. Do you think he doesn't have much choice? A friend of mine was present. I wasn't there for this. Bush didn't realize he was in the room. He was talking with Rice and Powell, I believe, and a couple others. And the delegation had left. My friend was off in the refreshment corner. And so he saw that they leave. Bush turned around. I am so tired of this. And he started 4-letter words. I don't want to do this job anymore. I would use 4-letter words, but we're on video here. It was quite colorful language telling how sick he was of this work and he wasn't going to do it anymore. So think about that. Think about that. People have this picture of what the president is and the kind of power he has. My experience, particularly this president, is very much a puppet. Much more than somebody who's calling the shots. And even the presidents you think who were really calling the shots, they had some power, but there were many over them who were telling them what to do on many different levels. So anyway, I woke up that morning, and I always go out for a run to get me fresh, and my body is one of my top priorities, keep in good shape, because it's a gift that I have on this planet. So I jogged down to the beach, and there was this steep drop of stairs and cliff down to this white sandy beach with the beautiful aquamarine waters in Bali. This is like 6 in the morning, but the sun is up at 6 there. Whole bunch of stairs, all different along these rock things. I hit the bottom, and there, literally no more than 20 feet from this white sand that I set my foot on, is a dead dolphin. About 6 foot, beautiful bluish silver dolphin, dead right in front of me. Whoa, this is weird. I've never seen anything like it. Haven't seen many dolphins live. So I thought, what does this mean? In my life, everything has meaning. Everything. It's a matter of sometimes I don't know what it is, but I know it's there. So I said, well, I know that I have choice in how I live my life, so I can choose to take this as a negative or a positive omen. So I'm going to say, what's the lesson here? What can I learn from this? And I opened, and immediately I felt the spirit of that dead dolphin right there with me. It's like, whoa, thank you, what a gift. Next thing I know, the whole school of dolphins that this dolphin was from was right there with me, saying, hey, we love you, we're here to support you. It's like, whoa. And yeah, I don't know what caused that dolphin to die. I have some weird speculations, but it's not important. What I got is this school of dolphins was there to support me. I don't think they sacrificed their dolphin, but So it started out weird. And remember, this is when I have thousands of people ready to support me on this day. So it's quite bizarre, but I really felt good feeling that school of dolphins. So the first strange thing that happened that day is I was in the room pre-stationed. They let a few people in early who are going to be there. And the Bush team walks through the door. It was Bush, Condoleezza Rice, Andrew Card is his chief of staff. There's the Asian affairs expert from the National Security Council, who I knew fairly well, Karen Burks. They walk through the door. Andrew Card looks over and sees me. He makes a beeline right at me and goes, hey, it's great to see you again. With a big smile and a warm handshake. I'd never even said hello to the guy. I had met him a month earlier And I don't remember, he probably was at the meeting in September, the first time. But it was so strange. He just walked right over and said, hey, it's so great to see you here. And then here we are getting ready for this big meeting. So I was happy and everything, but it was like, this is strange. So anyway, I just kept breathing, and some more strange things happened at lunch. So it was a pre-lunch and then a full-on luncheon, big banquet, and then some post stuff. And I'm just giving you the of course, all sorts of fascinating things that happen. But we're going into the luncheon room, which is a big banquet table. There's about 12 people there, about 6 on the American side, some of the people I mentioned, about 6 on the Indonesian side. I always sit right behind and at the elbow of the president, because I have to hear everything he's saying, and then I repeat, I'm his voice. So I'm always the closest one to him, actually, in most of these meetings. It's kind of strange, having that kind of, some people say, well, did you ever have thoughts about? And quite honestly, once or twice the thought crossed my mind. But, it's like, that's crazy, So, but there I am, sitting right at his elbow. So what happened? We walk into the luncheon room, and he's going to sit down. And he gets to the table, and he looks at the table, and he says, hey, I don't think I'd even said hello to him yet. I think he was busy. But he looked at him and said, hey, they didn't bring you any water. He said it right to me. He's like, what? Do you want some? And an interpreter actually needs a lot of water because you get a really dry throat. The interpreter's talking all the time. Normally, one person talks and then the other, Well, guess what? The interpreter ends up talking all the time if it's just one interpreter. So isn't that bizarre? Bush notices that I didn't get what? I've never had anything like that happen with any of my people that I've worked with. And then, I'll just tell you some fun little things. So here's Bush, and then there's people, I think Condoleezza Rice was like 2 over, Andrew Card was like here. And Megawati, the president of Indonesia, is sitting directly across. Well, what do they spend most of the lunch talking about? Things like, their cattle ranch and the farms that she has, and isn't it a drag being a president sometimes? And that kind of stuff. They didn't talk business hardly at all. They'd had their business meeting. It's like, so it's really interesting to hear the fun things they're talking. I know we even talked about the price of beef. And, So it's not always what you might think. But then about halfway through, Karen Burks, as I mentioned, was the Asian affairs expert at the National Security Council, a very high position with top secret clearance. National Security Council, I assume most of you know, is the intelligence body of the executive branch. I had got to know Karen quite well from the time I went to the White House right after 9/11. She was the one who briefed me and filled me in on all this stuff. And she was the one who got me involved in this secret meeting that ended up getting me on the front page of the Wall Street Journal when I blew the whistle. So, yeah, she kind of regretted, I think, some of the things eventually. But so in the middle of this lunch, Karen Burks comes over, and I swear to God, it was the weirdest thing. She came over and said, Fred, thank you so much. And she plants this big kiss, like 2-second kiss right on my cheek. Here in the, every time I'm like, what was that about? Sometimes I wonder if maybe they know more than we know, and they actually are wanting transformation just as much as we are, and they're just stuck in their jobs. And maybe they were thankful. I don't know. Maybe that's not true, but it's one thing that plays in my mind, and wouldn't that be cool? It's probably not true, but it's a nice thought. But anyway, so I'm just putting this out there. It's like, wow, things are not always what you think they are. I'm sure many people in this room have had some pretty nasty thoughts about Bush and others and whoever. And this is just an example that he's human too. He's actually nice. Most of that temper tantrum he threw, he only does that in very, very private places. When I see him in public, he's always been very nice and sincere. I remember the first time at the White House, after we'd finished an hour-and-a-half meeting, he turned to me, shook my hands, looked straight in the eye and said, thanks, great job. And interpreters, we're supposed to be invisible, and I love being invisible. There's something about being a channel in that way that I love doing. But we very much appreciate when the person we're working with at least says thank you at the end. About half of the people never do. And it's like, oh well. But it's just really nice to get a thank you. But his was not just a thank you. He looked me right in the eye and really connected with me. I mean, I could see that connection. So that's where I got it. Like, oh, this is a guy, he's, I labeled him a good old boy. I don't know how many of you have had friends who are good old boys, but the good old boys have good hearts. They're very conservative and very prejudiced and lots of other stuff, but they really do have good hearts. But they grew up, if you grew up, in some podunk, Oklahoma, with really conservative parents and all that values around you, you might have rebelled, as many of you here did, but you might have ended up being one of the good old boys or good old girls. So just tying this all back into the web of love and transformation here. So that is what I'm most passionate about in my life, is transformation. Let's take a breath together. Yeah. So one of the things I'm doing, it's funny, I was a little bit nervous before coming on because it's an unusual crowd and I'm really excited, but there's also some nervousness. I usually hardly get nervous at all. And the reason is, when I close my eyes, what I do is I feel your hearts. I know every one of you has that place in your heart. Most of you are even conscious of it. And so when I just connect with that, I feel this warmth and support. And it's so easy for me not to get very nervous. And just feel you and know that I'm here in service of you. I actually teach workshops. I lead workshops on various topics. And sometimes I teach people how to do workshops. And one of the things I say is every person in that audience has a part of them that wants to beat you down. That wants to say, who are you up to be talking to me up there? And I know better than you, particularly if you have arrogance. But, it's like, who is this person? Every one of you out there has this and had it about me before you came in here, no matter how big or small. And every person out there has a place that wants you to do an absolutely fabulous, stunning job and deliver something that will move them and inspire them to something bigger than who they are. So which do you choose to focus on? I don't want to deny the first. It's there. But I want to become good friends with that other part and invite it to come out. And that's what makes it so easy for me to talk in front of you and to talk at the presidential level on anything. So this comes back for me to the power of intention. Just, and no judgment at all, but I'm just curious, how many people here are really familiar with the power of intention in your life? Okay, good. So I want to propose that if you look at the way our society is organized, it does not really support us to look at what's most valuable to us in our life, to look at what's the most valuable really on the deeper level. What do we really care about? And then what do we want to do about that? We're never taught that in school. What do they teach our kids? Math, science, and we're failing in the numbers, so we've got to push to do more math, science, get them up in their heads so that we can become brilliant and be masters of the universe. Or at least be service to humanity. I don't want to make it all about. Some of it's trying to become a good thing, but it's not about getting into your heart, getting into your feelings. So what I've found in my life is the clearer that I am in my intentions, the more smoothly I move through all the stuff that comes up. And I have plenty of stuff come up just like everybody else, but it's become so much easier to deal with compared to 10 years ago in my life or 20 years ago in my life. And I attribute that to getting clearer and clearer on what my intentions are. So I want to share with you my two deepest intentions, because they've been so powerful, and I believe they're what got me to everything that I've had in my life. The first is I'll do my best to choose what's best for all of us. So what is all of us? All of us is all that is. It's the divine. It's the greater, bigger picture. I'll do my very best to choose based on what's best for all of us. And that's not exclusive of me. I'm not going to sacrifice myself so much that it hurts the whole. Some people here I used to be a people pleaser. And people pleasers tend to want to make everybody feel good and yet end up suppressing some parts of themselves to do that. This is not what it's about. I am as much of a part of the all that is as every one of us. So I'll do my best to choose what's best for all of us. That's the guiding principle of my life. And there's a more poetic way of saying the same thing, which often if I'm writing people, I'll use this as my main intention, because it really means the same thing. I give all that I am into the service of all that is. All that I am into the service of all that is. So that's my deepest intention. And I believe that's what brought all the miracles that ended up putting me in the White House and putting me, believe it or not, the White House is not the most transformative experiences in my life by any means. I had some other things that we probably can't even go into tonight that are just powerful. Kundalini rising, for anybody who knows that kind of stuff. Amazing experiences. And the second one that guides me is I open to guidance from the divine. And whatever the divine is, you know, we each have different conceptions of what the divine is. For me, the best description is all that is. But some people maybe are atheist, and I'm fine with atheist. If you're an atheist, you can say, hey, I have a greater part of me, or a higher self, or a deeper self, and that can be the divine. But by opening to the divine and trusting that there is something that knows more than just my ego awareness, then I can have all sorts of gifts. My first big breakthrough in my life happened when I said, I was in a spiritual crisis at age 19. And I said, all right, God, it used to be I was going to find God if he's there. I was agnostic. My father was a minister, and I kind of rebelled against that. And so I was agnostic. I don't know if there's God or not, but I have a sharp mind, and I have a big ego. I wouldn't say it that way, but I'm capable. I'm going to find God if he's there. But I went through a spiritual crisis, and I said, all right, God, I surrender. If you're there, please show yourself to me. And within months, my life started unbelievable. Can't get into all the stories. There's too many things we want to talk about. But so that's my second intention. I open to guidance from the divine. And I invite every one of you to spend some time. If you're not already clear on what your intentions are in life, take some time, find some time alone, go in, find out what's most valuable to you in your life. And it's not going to be the same as mine. I like my intentions, but I don't want everybody to have my intentions. Everybody has to find their own. What's most valuable to you, and how can you develop clear intentions that will help you to move through the difficult times? I have some handouts in the back there. Just curious, about how many people do we have here, the people who work here, just so I know? Looks like about 60 to 80, is that right? I had brought 60. So if you're a couple, I ask you to take only one handout, just in case we run out. But there's a handout back there called A Concise Guide to Personal and Global Transformation. And one of the sheets in there is how to find and develop your life purpose and intentions. So I highly recommend that as a guide for how to look at that if you don't have that already. So let's shift tack a little bit. Let's take a deep breath. So I know this is unconventional. I know a number of people came here to hear about all the deep cover-ups. We're going to get to that.
That's what we came for. That's what we're talking about.
Yes, we're going to get to that. Yep. So I have to, because of who I am, start with all of this, because this is the context that the cover-ups are always about for me. And the way to transform this planet is to come at these cover-ups from a place of desire, intention of transformation. If you come at it with fear and wanting to find out who screwed us and trying to get back at them, you're just creating more polarization.
Yes.
So this is why I have to preface all the cover-up stuff with this. So let's make a big shift here. Let's take a big, deep breath. Feel our connection. And we'll take a shift now. I thought I'd start off with a fun little video clip. It's a 6-minute clip that I imagine few of you here have seen that'll give you just an example of some of the things going on. So do I pull this way? From the other end, okay. I'll just briefly explain. The gentleman who's going to come on is from CBC, Canadian Broadcasting System, which is the PBS of Canada. And this was a show that was on one of their series of shows on the Canadian PBS. His name is Barry Zwicker. He's one of the heroes of the 9/11 movement. But it's not about 9/11.
Most everyone knows that Dr. King was a courageous Christian minister committed to the nonviolent pursuit of freedom for all people. In this pursuit, he went to jail 29 times. Nothing new so far, but prepare yourself for some stunning surprises. James Earl Ray, a petty criminal who died in 1998, and who, according to the official story, shot Dr. King, in fact did not shoot Dr. King, even though he pleaded guilty in 1969. That's right, James Earl Ray was not, absolutely without any question, not the killer. This footage of Dexter King shaking hands with James Earl Ray speaks volumes. Dexter and the other members of the King family have persevered ever since Dr. King's death to learn the truth about what happened and to make that truth known. They are convinced Ray was not the shooter. Ray's guilty plea comes about on the advice of a lawyer who approaches Ray and offers to represent him. It turns out this lawyer has connections with the true killers. The lawyer tells Ray that a guilty plea will make Ray famous and help him get off with a light sentence. Always easily led, Ray writes out what he's told to. And by the way, it's a guilty plea, not a confession. These facts are found in a book just out, the best single book on the assassination, An Act of State, the Execution of Martin Luther King. On the basis of the guilty plea, Ray is sentenced to 99 years in prison. Ray realizes he's been duped. 3 days after arriving in the penitentiary, he moves for his guilty plea to be set aside and that he be given a trial. But stalling by government officials denies him that for the rest of his life. To his dying day, he insists he did not kill Dr. King. Pepper's book includes a full account of the extensive civil trial into Dr. King's death, held in Memphis, Tennessee in 1999. That there was such a trial may be a surprise to you also. The family's suit names as defendants co-conspirators, both named and unknown. The trial is not about money. The family seeks $100 damages. The trial is about the truth. The trial lasts almost a month. 70 witnesses are heard. A jury of 6 black and 6 white persons takes just 1 hour to arrive at a guilty verdict against, quote, the co-conspirators consisting of the named defendant, Lloyd Jowers, and those that the defendant named in his response, namely the United States government, the state of Tennessee, the city of Memphis, and Memphis Police Department, James Earl Ray, Earl Clark, and Frank Liberto, unquote. Earl Clark, now deceased, was the top marksman in the Memphis Police Department. Frank Liberto was a mafia kingpin. Conspirators within the U.S. government, according to the trial and the book, include, quote, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, Richard Helms and the CIA, and the military, unquote. The reason all this information probably surprises you is that the mainstream media effectively boycotted the trial. As Pepper writes, the silence following these shocking revelations was deafening. Like the pattern during all the investigations of the assassination throughout the years, no major media outlet would cover the story. It was effectively buried. Just 6 of the many facts that come out at the trial. First, when King arrives in Memphis, he's taken not to his usual hotel, which is safe for him, but rather to another, and given a room he must reach by an exposed balcony readily visible from dense bushes behind Jim's Bar and Grill across the street, and from various high vantage points. Second fact, a special security unit of black officers assigned to King on all his previous visits to Memphis is told it's not required this time. Third fact, defendant Jowers, former owner of Jim's Bar and Grill, admits to receiving and storing a gun the day before the killing, being handed a still smoking gun the day of, and disposing of that gun. Fourth, U.S. Army snipers are positioned on 2 nearby rooftops and a water tower, not, as you'd expect, to protect King, but to back up the assassin in case he misses. He does not. Fifth fact, New York Times reporter Earl Caldwell is in a room close to King's. He comes out when he hears the shot. He and others testify for the trial that they saw a man crouching in the bushes behind Jim's Bar and Grill. This man cannot be James Earl Ray. Reliable witnesses see Ray leave the area before the shot is fired. Fact 6. The day after the killing, early in the morning, a city works crew is sent to cut down and methodically remove the bushes and all debris from behind Jim's Bar and Grill. The order comes from the Memphis Police Department. Whoever killed King, it was not James Earl Ray. He could never have coordinated such a plan or assembled such a task force, and he wasn't at the scene. He is the fall guy. But the trial, in effect, is boycotted by the media. That's why you don't know about it. That's why I didn't know about it until 3 months ago, through James Douglas. King recognized that powerful economic forces stunt history and kill hope. It's important to understand that these powerful forces now include the mainstream media. To study Dr. Martin Luther King's nonviolent quest for social and economic justice as the surest foundation for peace is to recognize him not only as a civil rights leader, but as a man of the hour, even in these troubling days. King's life and death remain important news.
So just something to help me. How many of you knew about that trial of Martin Luther King? A few. Well, that's cool. I wanted to pick something that I thought most people wouldn't know about so that you got a little bit of an education and got to see. I suspect, I suppose a show of hands here would be good. How many of you here know that there's a lot of major cover-ups going on in this world? Yeah, okay. So I'm preaching to the converted.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. But so I did a pretty good job of finding something you didn't know about. Is that 10? Okay. So isn't that amazing? They had this trial, the whole family of Martin Luther King suing the U.S. government, and they won. 6 white, 6 black jurors took 1 hour, I think he said, to come to a guilty verdict. The AP was there. Nobody else was there. The Associated Press reporter is an interesting story about, he actually wanted to report the story, but it was shut down. They shut him down, and he decided to keep quiet. He wasn't going to fight that one. Isn't that fascinating? Right. For questions, we have to use a microphone. Is this an important question? Yeah.
Was there any foreign press there?
Was there any foreign press there? I don't know all the details. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sometimes the foreign press does a much better job of reporting these things than the U.S. press. So this is just one example of how the media helps to concoct our consensus reality. And I suspect most of you already know this. And if you don't, I invite you to take a look at the media cover-up section of wanttoknow.info. I need another show of hands here. How many here have taken a look at the website that I manage called wanttoknow.info? Okay, less than half. Okay, so let me give a little bit about that. So many stories I could tell. But My father was a conspiracy theorist. My father believed this world was run by a small group of white men who made all the decisions and that we were going to die within 10 to 15 years. I grew up with that. I rebelled against that. How's that for a twist? He was a liberal Methodist minister who believed in the Christic Institute and all that kind of stuff. And when I was 10 years old, my dad telling me that if Nixon was elected, the world was going to end within probably by the end of his first term, if not his second. And so here I am, a little 10-year-old. Nixon gets elected, and it's like, oh, wow, you know, what if Dad's right? Well, guess what? The world went on and on and on. And every time I checked in with my dad, to this day I check in with him. Do you think the world's still going to kill itself within 10 to 15 years? Oh, yeah, for sure. Within 10 to 15 years, at the very least, the whole economy is going to collapse. I heard that my whole life. I didn't see it happen. So can you understand why there's some rebellion there? Even though my dad went to jail for civil disobedience and all this stuff, the 4 kids of us, I had 3 sisters and brothers, we never wanted to go. It's like, you go do that, Dad. My friends, just 5 years ago, I live in a wonderful group house that has 5 adults and 2 kids. And one of my housemates is a conspiracy theorist. And so when I moved in there, he would tell me all this stuff, and I'd say, Declan, say, sorry, I've been there. I've been at the top. I've seen these meetings. It's not true. I did not know 5 years ago anything of all this major stuff. I knew, of course, I knew that there was corruption and conspiracy in the highest places, but I never bought into the whole powerful cabal that rules the world thing. You know, it was just economic forces and greed and all that. 4 years ago, a wonderful spiritual friend of mine in North Carolina said, Fred, you've got to watch this video. It'll change your life. And so I said, oh, send it out to me. So he mailed it out to me, and I put it in the thing. This is 6 weeks before 9/11. Anybody here, who here knows about Dr. Stephen Greer? Disclosure Project. Okay. So it was Dr. Greer's Disclosure Project video. 2-hour video. By the end of that video, my jaw was on the floor. Remember, I knew nothing about all this stuff. My jaw was on the floor, and I said, oh my God, the world is not what I thought it was. It was that big. Because it was 22 government and military witnesses, name, rank, and serial number, every one of them well-known, not everyone, almost everyone, well-known, well-established credentials, the kind of people that I work with. I've worked with a lot of generals, and you would be amazed at how much impeccability most of our generals and the high-level people have. It is a highly hierarchical structure designed to do a function, and yes, there's corruption, yes, there's lots of weirdness, but these people have a high integrity, high level of integrity and pride about what the American military is. So when I saw these people saying things about UFOs, and before that I thought, of course there must be UFOs. It'd be arrogant of the human race to think there's no other life in the universe, but I'd never heard a single story that sounded convincing to me of UFOs around the Earth in this lifetime. But when I heard 22 government and military witnesses telling me about things like, you know, having one guy holding up the Chief of Accidents and Investigations at the FAA. Think of that, his position, Chief of Accidents and Investigations at FAA, saying, I've got the radar here, I've got the video, I've got the audio, you can come, and he's talking to this audience in the National Press Club, one of the most prestigious press institutions in our nation, in Washington, D.C., with everyone present, ABC, NBC, all of the media is there, the foreign media. He's saying, I've got the videotapes, I've got the audio tapes. You can see this UFO buzzing around this 747. He said, come up and talk to me. He was just one of witnesses. Another guy talking about bases on the backside of the moon. What? I mean, for me, that was a huge leap. But look who's talking. A high-ranking military officer telling me that he'd seen photographs, you know, NASA photographs of a base on the backside of the moon. If it was just 3 or 4 witnesses, it wouldn't have convinced me. I would have said something's going on here. But he had 22 witnesses. Each one was given 5 minutes at the National Press Club. And, again, the silence was deafening. The thing that convinced me more than anything else is only one major newspaper in this entire country reported it, the Washington Times, owned by the Moonies. It was on page A3. Supportive. That's a whole nother story. But you saw them there in the video, ABC, NBC, all these, and nobody would report this. So to me, now just so you know, once I got this, first I had to get on the phone with my dad and say, Dad, I'm sorry. Now he's one of my biggest supporters. And then it was like, I wanted to tell all my friends. Oh my God, you should know this. And so I'm like showing my friends, and I couldn't believe the responses. My friend who's a lawyer says that National Press Club sign is a little bit tilted. I think the whole thing was faked. At the time, I didn't know about the Washington Times article, which you can find on the line. But it's like, his response after seeing it's like, it was all faked. If you saw how professionally done it was, you'd have to go, whoa. But you know, the point being that I'd say less than a quarter of my friends were willing to even watch it and have any sort of shift around that unless they already believed in it. You find out that actually many more people believe in this stuff than you might ever suspect because the media shuts it out and never lets you know how many people believe that stuff. Especially here in Ashland, I'll bet it's really high. How many here believe or know that there's a UFO ET presence around this planet right now? Okay, and I want to honor those who don't. Really, don't believe anything I say. The reason the website that I manage, wanttoknow.info, has become popular is because it's all about reliability and verifiability. Almost everything we have on that website has a link for you to verify what is said. We have a link to that video. You can go watch that video free. Not only that, we have links to the people, so you can go check out that this person is who they say they are. We have a link to the Washington Times website where you can see that it's published there. So it's all about reliability and verifiability. Don't believe me just because I'm saying this. Believe me, I get so much information. Now that I have this website, everybody sends me information. I always start out, if it's something new, let's be skeptical first. But then open your mind enough that if there's a preponderance of evidence, maybe it could be true. So that's what wanttoknow.info is all about, and we've now had over 1 million visits, and the only website that I know that really focuses on reliability and verifiability that covers all the cover-ups. Unlike some of the great websites like Stephen Greer's website, Disclosure Project, about UFOs, it's an excellent website. But it's only about UFOs. We actually cover all the stuff. We have 2- and 10-page summaries on almost every major cover-up. So if you don't have much time, you got a 2-page summary, and not only that, it's got the links in that summary. So particularly like 9/11 is one of the best. We have ABC News and NBC News saying things that, how come that wasn't front page? You know, it's like one of the things, New York Times, Washington Post, and I believe it was Newsweek, September 15th, and one of them was September 16th. Looks like several of the hijackers of 9/11, this is 4 days after 9/11, may have had training at U.S. military installations. What? Newsweek, Washington Post, New York Times, you can see it on our website. What is that about? Why wasn't that front page news? The Newsweek article is the best. It goes into detail talking about the 2 hijackers whose driver's licenses were Pensacola Naval Station. Oh, isn't that interesting? They had apartments that, I don't remember all the details because there's too much to know. But if you go in and look at all the details in this Newsweek article, it's like at least 20 different points that are like, what is that? How could that be? What? Next day comes out in the thing, well, the military called us and said it was just a coincidence of names. That's it. End of story. Okay, story's dropped. Right? No big deal. All those little details, Pensacola driver's license, oh no, it's just a coincidence of names. So it's all about reliability and verifiability. We all are affected to some degree by what the media puts out and wants to create as a consensus reality. I saw this even before I was into conspiracies, how the media has a huge impact on what we see and believe. So for the few here who don't know a lot about these cover-ups, it's vital that you first understand the media cover-up. Once you get it, and it's not that all the reporters are into this conspiracy. It's not actually, though I applaud my dad now in some ways, it's not simplistic. At the low and middle levels, there are many great reporters trying to get out great stories. And even at some of the higher levels. But it's the ownership and the people at the top who have final editorial say, who, if they see anything serious about UFOs, until just recently, it does not go into the paper. If they see anything about CIA involvement in drug running, ooh, no, 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 no. You all know what happened to Gary Webb?
Oh, yeah.
Gary Webb, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, came out in 1995 when they didn't know the power of the internet and reported on some serious CIA drug running. It was spread rapidly over the internet, especially the African-American community was incensed and outraged. Did it go into other newspapers? It was in the San Jose Mercury, was the one that was brave enough. What eventually happens, and Gary Webb's editors are so excited. This is like huge breaking news, and his editor above his editor is excited. CIA comes for a visit to the San Jose Mercury News, and you can read all about this on the website in the 2-page summary. I have a few of them back there. CIA comes and makes an argument with sufficient vigor, I believe is the word that they said, that they had to make some clarifications. And interestingly enough, though this had gotten some media attention, it was never anywhere big. Once Sepos, who was his editor, said, "We believe it was now mistaken," and all this stuff, that was splashed on the front page of the New York Times. Isn't that interesting? They never made the front page, wasn't even get much mention at all, but suddenly, when it changed, they knew how much the people were already believing it. It made the front page. So the media cover-up is a key. And in fact, if you're trying to invite, and I really encourage you not to force anyone, but to invite your friends to open up to this information, it's really great to start with the media cover-up.
Do you believe Gary Webb was murdered? They announced in the news it was a suicide, but...
Do I believe Gary Webb was murdered? My own personal opinion is very likely, but it's so hard on those kind of things to know for sure. But I can tell you that if you go and start exploring some of the mind control, which is the deepest, scariest stuff, you find out that, and there's all sorts of government documents that have been released to show you that we have the technology to manipulate people much more than you would ever imagine.
Yeah.
Non-lethal weapons, how many here know about non-lethal weapons? So not that many. It's a good topic to learn about, and there's lots of released government documents. If you go to our mind control summary, it's mostly based on government documents rather than major media websites that have been released thanks to the wonderful Freedom of Information Act. And we tell you the document number, the page number. There are websites that have them posted so you can see them free there. We tell you for $30, you can send away, and it took 3 weeks for me. I got a packet back this thick from the CIA, Freedom of Information Office, filled with 20,000 pages worth of mind control documents. No, I'm sorry. That was 20,000 pages was on 3 CDs. 20,000 pages would be like that. I ordered a couple trial congressional testimonies that were that thick. But it was the first time it was those 3 CDs with 20,000 pages. So let's all take a deep breath. I can get really going and rolling on this stuff, and I think we should take a break now, and then we'll come back and go some more. And the key thing here is, if you leave here with a lot of fear or anger, I feel like I haven't done my job. So even though some of this stuff might sound really weird and scary and even maybe threatening to how you look at things, I have no doubt that we can and will transform this planet. So let's take a break. It's good to get up and move a little bit. And by the way, can I have it quiet for a minute, please? Shh. Thank you. By the way, if anybody wants to reach me by email, you can go to any one of the websites and hit Contact Us. I am the one who answers all the emails. But I ask you to be aware that I am the one who answers all the emails and try to keep them brief. Yeah, I so far pretty much answer all of them unless they're really nutcases, in which case I do get some pretty crazy, and some of them are really just disturbed and have been badly influenced. And usually them I'll try to give something. Anyway, let's all take a nice deep breath together. I get very excited when I talk about this stuff. Do you want to know why? Because for 40-something years, I didn't know why I was here on this planet. How many of you here had something like that? For 40 years, I've been pretty good about keeping a diary, you know, on and off. And every year I'd write, you know, God, I feel like I'm here to do something. I was given a lot of talents. I mean, I do have arrogance that I'm working on, but I was also blessed with a lot of talents, language and music and all these things that I'm really good at. And I felt like I was given this stuff for a reason. So I'd write, you know, it seems like I'm here for some reason and I don't know. As long as I don't know, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Then I watched that video that I told you about, and it's like, oh, this is something big. And then 9/11, oh, okay. And before long, I absolutely knew why I was here. Once I scanned the internet and saw that nobody had a website covering the big picture from a reliable, verifiable place, I said, all right, that's what I'm here to do. And to have the counterbalance of the Web of Love and the others. And significant parts of Want to Know That info, they never push the Web of Love because most people aren't ready for that or just aren't open to it. And so it's always just kind of down at the bottom. There's a list of the other websites managed by peers. And hopefully, if people get interested enough, one day they'll go take a look. Usually I mention the Moment of Love first because that's not as difficult for people who aren't open to this to see and read. So I'm going to go back mega for a minute before we dive more into the juicy cover-up stuff. I had a great question during the break. So who's really behind all this? Great question. Who's really behind all this? I actually do know the answer to that.
Oh, let's hear it.
I think I do. You probably will find it difficult to believe. But the one that I believe is behind all of this at the highest level is you. You. Every one of us co-creates everything that happens in some way. I'm in the Metaphysical Center, so those of you who are just coming to hear a Presidential Insider, I apologize, but I'm seeing this as a metaphysical audience, so I'm taking a metaphysical stand because I am a modern-day mystic in some ways. And the metaphysical stance, we're all interconnected. And so I ask you to bear with me if this is too much New Age hogwash. I will get to some juicy stuff for you later, too.
No, we already know that.
Right, but for those of you who here are metaphysically oriented, there's this hierarchy. And the more people you have, the more rungs there are in the hierarchy. And what I find happens is that when I talk about a mass consciousness, every group, us in here, we could say there's a mass consciousness that I'm trying to read and work with. Every group of people has their own consciousness with its similarities and dissimilarities. The globe has a mass consciousness. And I believe each of us plays an absolutely vital role in that mass consciousness which co-creates this reality. So I believe every one of us is equally responsible for everything that happens. And in fact, the deepest work that I do on this planet is the work on myself. I know that for me. The Want to Know That info stuff, that's important. But if I was just doing, I would rather not do it than just do that. Because it's when I transform myself, you feel it when I talk to you. If I hadn't done my work, I would feel very different to you. I might be talking from much more of a place of fear and all this stuff, and might get you excited and lots of fear of anger, but that's not what I'm about. I got it a long time ago when I got this, what's best for all. It's not about polarization. How many of us in our relationships, including me, haven't had times when you're like, it's you. You are doing this to me, Well, guess that's what they're doing at the highest levels. You work with these guys and you find out sometimes I see they're like little boys. You should have seen when the premier of China was going to meet with Al Gore. Al Gore was 3 minutes late with an African president. The premier of China, with his delegation of 5, if he's not here in 1 minute, we're storming out. And sure enough, 2 minutes before the appointed interview, they stormed out of the room. If he wants to meet with us, he can come to our place. And it was a quarter of a mile across this huge compound in Denmark at a UN conference. Acting like little kids. You think these highest level politicians are any better than us? Sorry. Some of them occasionally, some are more smart or more talented or whatever than others, but overall they're pretty human, with all the human foibles that go along with that. And so that's what the bigger picture I invite us to look at. When we work on ourselves, we then can become more powerful in transforming our world. The core issue work for me is some of the deepest stuff. If you look in that handout, Concise Guide to Personal and Global Transformation, the very first page is Transform Fear through core issue work. And I sometimes lead workshops in that. I think that's some of the most powerful work I do, because when you get it, some of the programming that runs your life, that's old programming that worked when you were a kid to survive those very scary experiences that you went through, but they don't necessarily work anymore, but you're still running that same program. And when you make a decision to change that programming and hold an intention to shift it, you'll see big shifts in your life, and the whole world responds. It sends a ripple out into the mass consciousness. And the whole chaos theory, where the butterfly flaps in Argentina and a hurricane happens somewhere else. So I just wanted to make sure I got that mega question. Who's responsible? Every one of us. Each one of us. When we start with ourselves, I could tell many stories on that. Okay, so it seemed like there's a lot of interest in 9/11. So how many here would say they know a good amount about the 9/11 cover-up? Just good for me to get a feel. A lot of you, okay. And now, I'm going to ask you, don't feel bad at all, but if you don't know much about the 9/11 cover-up, please raise your hand. It's good for me to get an idea. Okay, just so you guys know, there's only about 10. So I'm going to have to kind of move from the assumption here that you have some knowledge, and I'll try to fill in the blanks for those who don't know. On the day of 9/11, I had already been awakened 6 weeks earlier by the UFO cover-up, and seeing that huge, massive level of cover-up, of course, I was much more open to the idea. I'm sure that if I had not had that, I would have a very different view of 9/11. That said, still, when the plane went into the Pentagon, I had no doubt that this was manipulated. Why? Because I had traveled in helicopters and planes with top military generals who loved to brag. We can have a plane up on any plane in this country within 10 minutes. Any plane that goes off, and they would brag about that stuff. And so I'd heard top-level military bragging about this stuff, and you're telling me the most fortified military central neural network of this entire country militarily, an hour and a half after the first plane is discovered to be off course, that a slow-moving, I'm going to say slow-moving because, just so you know, remember Star Wars? Notice how after 9/11, Star Wars disappeared off the radar. What was Star Wars about? A missile coming at 10 times or more the speed of an airliner, undetected, no transponders in missiles. It's flying, hurtling towards the U.S. They have 10 minutes to shoot it down. That's what Star Wars is about. Now, some of the Star Wars programs failed, but some were successful. So are you going to tell me that an airplane relatively lumbering at 1/10 the speed of a missile, so they turn off the transponders? Guess what? NORAD doesn't need transponders. The FAA does. NORAD does not need transponders, and they have a map of where everything is in Cheyenne Mountain. That's public knowledge. In Wyoming, watching everything that's going all the time. And their alarms go off before the FAA. I can almost guarantee you that. I don't have proof of that, but I've worked with these people enough to know. So an hour and a half after the first plane is missing, and let's see, it was the first plane hit at 8:46, I believe, and the Pentagon was officially hit at 9:37. 50 minutes after the first plane went into the building, that the most fortified building in our country could be hit like that. So even if I hadn't been a conspiracy theorist or opened up this information, I would have been asking serious questions. David Ray Griffin, who's a well-known theologian, one of the most highly respected theologians in our country, and he had written 20 books, and his last 2 books are about the problem of evil, interestingly enough. He was one of the first mainstream figures to stand up in the 9/11 movement and said, we got to talk about this. And by the way, a little bit of bragging here, he found about his information from our 2-page summary originally. A colleague of his sent that to him, and then he went on and went to the 60-page summary on our website and started his research. Well, that's how I kind of became friends with him. So, thank you. That, once that happened, I said my work is done. I mean, not complete, but it's like, if I got David Ray Griffin, if you hear this guy speak, he is so warm and friendly. He has a better sense of humor than I do. And he's this warm sort of grandfatherly figure. And he's talking about serious stuff. And he says he didn't believe it at first. For a long time, he thought it was blowback, which is what many people believed. Of course, we've done all this stuff to them, and they want to get back at us. But then this colleague sent the 2-page summary with all the links, and that's the key. It was all verifiable. And he started checking them out. He said, oh, my goodness. And before long, he wrote a book called The New Pearl Harbor, which I highly recommend. Although the second book is even better, and that's the 9/11 Commission Report, Omissions and Distortions. If you want to read David Ray Griffin, I actually was one of the editors, or not editors, proofreaders of that book. So this guy comes out and starts saying all this stuff. And among the things he talks about, which I totally agree, how many cameras, security cameras, do you think are focused on the outside of the Pentagon? Who knows, but it's got to be at least a couple dozen, right? At least a dozen are focused on the one side, at least, right? How many pictures has the Pentagon released? How many of these videos? One. They did release one, and it's totally inconclusive. And they say this is the proof. No, the filling station one was never released. That was actually Pentagon, if you go and look at it, it's actually it's at the security gate camera. So one of the things we're pushing for, and I invite you to join in whatever way, is get the Pentagon to release these videos. There's lots of testimony that, do you know that all of the emergency communications in the World Trade Center towers was declared national security? This is always the excuse when you need to cover up something. For reasons of national security, you need not know what happened. Why can't we know what the firefighters were talking about among each other? New York Times, and this is where the media is not always as controlled as you think, New York Times sued the city of New York saying, you must release those records. It took them 3 years, and they won their lawsuits. How many people know what was in those discussions? Secondary bomb on 17th floor. We heard another explosion up there long before the towers collapsed. What are all these explosions doing happening in the World Trade Center before it collapses? Why wasn't that information released? Why was that national security? This is all, it's on the New York Times website. You can actually go and read the testimonies there. It's very interesting that these pages look really shabby. They're not formatted at all. It's just straight text. And it's interesting that they made them look so ugly, but it's there. You can see it's on the New York Times website. The New York Times was going to sue us for having their article, the one article that they did put out questioning the collapse of the World Trade Centers back in 2002, we had on our website. Lawyer contacted us, said, you better take that down or we're going to take you to court. Isn't that interesting? And we have 35 articles from the New York Times, and they only wanted that one. I don't think they even realized we had these others. We had to give in because it would take so much time and money to try to contest the New York Times, even though we definitely had a legal standing, because we're not making any profit on all of this. So, but interestingly, what we did is we summarized it down to 2 paragraphs, which they were totally okay with. You can do a summary. And they said, if you want the entire article for free, there's ways to do this on the internet, and we just describe exactly how to do that. So we found a way around it. So the Pentagon, and I'll bring up World Trade Center 7. Most of you know, I'll just be brief on this. World Trade Center 7, most people even forgot that it collapsed. It was a 47-story building 100 yards away from the 2 big buildings. Suffered minimal damage, some broken windows, nothing major. 47 stories, 100 yards away at 3:15. Thank you, 5:20. I used to know all this stuff, but when I first compiled all that stuff. 5:20 in the afternoon, 47-story building collapses, and lots of video cameras caught this. Perfect demolition. A perfect demolition, the center drops first, and then you see the whole thing just collapse like a house of cards. Couldn't be more perfect. And free fall speed. Anybody can go on and look, just Google World Trade Center 7 video collapse. You'll find it. It's on our website. You can Google on our website. By the way, we have a search engine on our website. So any particular topic you can Google and see if we have it there. So just those two things to me alone are enough to say something is not right with 9/11. So.
What about the anti-ballistic security around the Pentagon? I never heard that explained. If it was supposedly an airliner, what happened?
The question is, what about the anti-ballistic defense at the Pentagon? It's all top secret. There's no way we can find reliable, verifiable information on that. So, of course, it makes sense. They must have had some sort of protection. I can tell you, how many people here know about protected airspace? If you're in the military, you know there are no-fly zones where absolutely nobody can go in. And as soon as they do, less than 10 minutes, you've got fighters right up on you. Yeah, and believe it or not, there's much more of this country as protected airspace than you would imagine. There's huge secret projects where nobody's allowed to fly over. So, yeah, there's so many questions about 9/11. That's why I don't try to convince anybody. I just give you enough to whet your appetite, and it's all there on the website. Yeah.
Why do you suppose so many people who are in the Pentagon and in the government and in the news media who can see clearly that there's something rotten there?
Very good question.
Quiet?
Why, when so many people are in the Pentagon and media must know about this stuff, why aren't they talking about it? Thank you, because this is actually the next topic I wanted to move to. Many people, many less people than you might imagine, know about the cover-up. These people are incredibly smart. Here's the thing. This was an important realization for me. The government is a huge bureaucracy. I had to deal with it all the time. Do you know how long it took to get my paychecks? Oh my God. 6 weeks sometimes for a month's worth of work. It was a good chunk of a paycheck. But that's just one little example. There's so much. The government is an incredibly inefficient bureaucracy. How could they ever carry out a 9/11 or some big conspiracy? Just curious. Anybody here know the answer? Because there's a good answer to that. Okay. The answer is that the intelligence services and the military are incredibly streamlined and efficient. And yes, they have their weaknesses, but compared to the government, they are like, yes, sir, and we know who's in charge. There is no question when your rank is corporal and you're talking to a sergeant, or when you're a colonel and you're talking to a general, there is no question about who follows whose orders. So things get done in the military. Yes, sir. How many people here were in the military? Yep, you guys know this stuff. And boot camp, whew. Anyway, so the military is incredibly organized, as is the CIA, not as much as the military, but CIA and FBI are much more organized, much more hierarchical. And the shadow government is not the military, the CIA, FBI, but it is certain rogue elements within the military, the CIA. And these elements are much smaller than you might think. It doesn't take that many people to pull off a major operation like 9/11. So,
that wasn't my question. My question
oh, yes,
is,
thank you.
I knew that.
Yes.
My question is,
thank you.
It's still obvious to people who are close to it, the firefighters,
Right.
you know, that any kind of injury.
Thank you. I got off topic. So the key is then, how do, well, I'll just tell you, I am fairly certain that most of these people are stuck in the boxes that we put ourselves in. When we grow up, we're taught that the scientific paradigm is reality. Everything else is voodoo. We're taught what the world is as we grow up as kids, and we're taught not to step out of the box too much. If you were in a really good school or advanced school, maybe you were one of those lucky people who got encouraged to think out of the box. But our educational system keeps people in boxes, and the people in the military, even the generals, are brought up to think in boxes. In fact, the military is even more box thinking than most places. And so if you don't know about all the cover-ups, even if the information is in plain sight in front of your eyes, you cannot see it. Why? Because your mind cannot psychologically accept that it was not terrorists. You have been told, yes, sir, you have been told who did it. And even if you have some questions about some things you have seen, those get pushed aside. Yes, sir. So there's a huge psychological barrier. And I've been actually a strong advocate from the beginning that the way we reach people is through breaking through the psychological barriers. It's not about evidence. We have evidence up the kazoo. that I think is incredibly convincing. So the question is, how do we break the psychological barrier, not only in the people in the Pentagon and those who should have known all this stuff, but among our own friends? We're talking about reality. My jaw was on the floor. I think I have just somehow, because of my upbringing and rebelling against my father and everything, that I was more out-of-the-box thinker. And I also have a deep spiritual path that allowed me to open to this. So for me, it was not easy, but it only took 2 hours and my jaw was on the floor. As I said, my friends are all like, no, Fred, it's a psychological problem. So how do, and I'm so thankful that now that seems to have become the main topic among the key thinkers of the 9/11 movement. I'm in email contact with most of them, and it's become a big topic. It used to be the argument, do we talk about evidence or do we talk about theory? But now we're talking, it's a psychological problem. Yeah.
I don't know, it just seems to me that the news organizations, newspapers, television, they are complicit in the thing. And we have generations of people who know that their parents found out stuff from ABC and the New York Times and Washington Post, and they're not reporting it, so it can't be true.
Right. So yes, the newspapers and the media do play a key role, but even there, even people in the media who know there's a lot of corruption going on, we're talking about a whole nother level compared to any other cover-up, compared to the John F. Kennedy assassination. So to make that psychological leap, even if you know some of this stuff is going on, people will not look at the evidence. Even if some part of them thinks it might be true, that's too scary to look at. They're not going to admit it. But they don't want to look at it. It's too scary. Somebody was talking during the break about approaching senators and congressmen, which is awesome, and being belittled because of that. And I honestly believe that a lot of these people don't know. Some of the 1 or 2 key people on the Intelligence Committee, I think, actually knew about 9/11. But I think as congressmen and senators,
Biden's on the Senate Intelligence.
only a few people had any sort of foreknowledge. Do you know, one of the key things is Newsweek reported about a week after 9/11. Newsweek has learned through reliable sources that top Pentagon generals canceled their travel plans on September 10th. On September 10th. So how much did they know if they're canceling their plans on September 10th? John Ashcroft, our Attorney General at the time, stopped flying commercial flights 6 weeks before 9/11. If he was in on the plot, he would have known it was going to be September 11th. He would have just not flown on September, not made reservations, right? So was John Ashcroft involved? Were these generals involved? I don't think so.
So why did they stop flying?
Because they had knowledge something big was coming down. Alex Jones announced 6 weeks before 9/11 that he thought very soon there was going to be something more or less like a 9/11. Alex Jones has become a big kind of cult hero in the conspiracy theorists. So.
Don't you think also a deterrent?
I'm sorry, they had their hands up first, so I really have to go back here. Yeah.
Something like that would be a special ops.
Yes.
Special ops are always highly compartmentalized.
Thank you. Yes, and I can talk to that.
So therefore,
They can't hear you, so do you mind if I? Yeah.
what will happen is that the word may get out to everybody to lay low for the next couple of weeks.
Yes.
Don't fly.
Yes. So, special ops.
Something is going to happen. And whoever
Thank you, sir.
maybe
They can't hear you, so I'm going to really cut you off, and I apologize. We can talk more later if you like. So I learned before all the cover-up stuff, as I was traveling with these military people. I remember we were driving in a car in Arizona on an Air Force base, and he said, "You want to know what's over there?" I said, "You can't know. It's a black op. I don't know. Nobody can know. It doesn't exist." I was like, "What?" He started telling me about what black ops are. The official name, Unacknowledged Special Access Projects, USAP. And that means that this project legally does not exist. And legally, you can totally lie, even in court. And you are protected because there are laws that protect these black ops or special projects. Mission Impossible. And what you find is that even within these projects, this man is working on one aspect and he has no idea what this man is doing.
Exactly.
So the compartmentalization, the term uses, they're compartmentalized. And the key term that you hear is the need to know. You may not share. You sign your oath. You may not share anything about this project with anyone, including your wife, unless there is a specific need for that person to know. So this part of my pinky doesn't know what this part is doing. I would guess there was on the order of 10,000 people involved in some aspect of causing 9/11 to happen. Of those 10,000, my rough, very rough estimate is maybe 100 to 300 actually knew that they were supporting 9/11 and happening. So what happened when these other 9,700 people, when the trade centers came tumbling down, what do you think is going through their mind? They suddenly realized they did one piece in helping this thing to happen, because now they get it. This thing that they did, whether it was doing something in the World Trade Centers or something they did, what happens in their mind? The country is suddenly in a fear. The whole world is in sympathy, and everybody's talking about the evil hijackers. What's going through your mind psychologically? The answer is you're going, holy shh.
That's right.
And you're going, oh my God, what do I do? This is too big for me. I'm going to shut my mouth and just stay quiet. You mention a thing and people would be, anybody who wasn't in on it would be just on your back. The other choice, that was one choice, and so many people did that and just stayed quiet. The other choice is, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. And yet there's no way I can speak about it. I'm going to do my best to somehow shift this thing. And I can tell you, I believe there are thousands of people who feel guilty about their role in what happened. They did not know they were involved in planning these things, and they have been working quietly, secretly, behind the scenes, because they know that they could get seriously even killed if they leak this information, but they are working in whatever way they can to change this thing. And I can tell you, there are elements, there has been a near coup in our military, because certain key people in the military, a lot of the officers in fact, figured out what's going on, and they're sharing it with each other, and they're saying, this is so wrong. But this is not, you're going to read this in the newspaper. I get this just from my inside sources, the stuff I can't put on wanttoknow.info, because it's somebody just sharing personal information. But so you got to understand, it's much more psychological. It's not about the evidence. Okay, whoever's had his hand up back there for a long time, go ahead.
This has been the most haunting question for me. I do not believe that an airplane hit the Pentagon. I do not have enough information to believe that an airplane went down to Pennsylvania.
Right.
Where the hell are those people?
Okay,
What happened to those passengers?
Okay, once you get into the 9/11 movement, there's all sorts of major questions that are very difficult to answer. Was it a plane that actually went into the Pentagon or not? I don't know. I have suspicions, but I'm not even going to tell you, because then I'm just giving you my opinion and I'm going to influence you. I don't think it's important. And this is vital. I really don't think right now this is important. What is important is that we build the pressure, that people open up and start asking questions and demand the Pentagon to release those videos. Then we'll decide whether, maybe it was. There are people who claim that because they knew it was going to come out, actually, it was a real plane that went in there, but they're holding back the videos because they knew that the people would grab onto that, and this is a way of discrediting the 9/11 movement. That's possible.
But the 16-foot hole.
I don't know. No. So, okay. All my point is that the 9/11 movement from the beginning has been fighting each other. Once you're in it, they're finding all sorts of stuff to fight each other. Guess what? Surprise, surprise. We become ineffective. And thank you for those who don't. Thank you to David Ray Griffin, Stephen Jones, who don't buy into that. Say, I don't know the answers. And that's why I'm not going to even give you my opinion, because it's not important. What's important is we get people to start asking questions and not to fight and argue about what really happened. The videotapes will show us that plain and clear. Yeah.
Yeah, you said there were thousands of people involved in You said there were thousands of people involved, but they only knew a little bit. There were maybe only 100 or 200 people who knew the whole deal.
Right.
Who, could you say who those 100 or 200 or 50 people were who really knew what was going on?
I can only speculate on that, but I can tell you the most knowledgeable man I have found of all these cover-ups is Dr. Stephen Greer. And I was lucky enough to be able to spend 2 weeks with him. And he has his faults, believe me. Anybody who knows him well, you think I have arrogance. But he's great. I totally support his work, and he's got his faults. But that man knows a lot. And he was the one who, as I said, he told me, you need to go check out this and that. And everything I checked out, it was like, whew. And so I tend to put some stock in what he told me. And I'm blanking.
Who was behind it,
right.
that is?
So he believes that there are a top group, that it is rather hierarchical, and at the top there's a group of, he says, you know, one part of it has about 30 people, another part has about 300 people that are some of kind of like the most powerful people on this planet, and that one faction of that group was behind 9/11. It's really important. One faction of the group, not the whole group. And he says there's all sorts of info. He claims to actually know one or two people in that inside circle who have contacted him. So I don't know him to be a liar, so, but it's very possible. But I can tell you all of this stuff, it's always more complicated than you think. That's why I never talk about I know the answer. I say, you know, I'm almost certain of this.
So we don't know who those people were? Like, they weren't the richest
I can
people
name
in
some
the
names,
world, or?
but I'm really not interested in the details here. And I really, to be honest, yes, it'd be fascinating to know, but I don't think it's that important. Okay, I'm seeing a 10-minute warning here, so I actually like to shift from 9/11. I know there's tons of questions because I do believe 9/11, it's coming out already. How many knew that David Ray Griffin was on MSNBC the other night? Yes, it'll be going out in my next email in about 4 days. If you sign up for the list, you'll get a link. You can go watch it. He was on C-SPAN a couple years ago. How many know that Lou Dobbs came out about a week ago on CNN and said, why was the 9/11 Commission lying to us? He's had a whole 5-minute segment. How many know that Thomas Keane, who headed the commission, and Lee Hamilton have co-written a book backpedaling on some of the things that happened in the commission, saying that the FAA and NORAD lied to them? Why didn't they ever say this before?
Yeah, because...
Do you know why? Because they thought they were safe. Now they're seeing how many people are aware of the 9/11 movement, and they say, I better get away from this. I don't think they knew beforehand what was going to happen. But they played along, and now they're starting to get scared. So you're seeing everybody starting to wake up. But we only have a few minutes left, so I'd rather shift from 9/11.
You were dwelling.
It's coming out.
You were dwelling before on getting people to think outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got a suggestion on how we can get people to think outside the box?
The key here is when you want to talk to people about this stuff, because certainly it's vitally important, can you come from a place of relative calm? Because when you come with anger or resentment or saying, oh, my urgency even, that will turn most of your friends off. Watch David Ray Griffin on TV and see if you can't try to emulate that behavior. And if you realize the metaphysical vision that we are going to transform. We needed 9/11, and I hate to say this, but I really do believe spiritually we needed 9/11 to kick us in the butt, as it did to me too, and say, we got to do something. So that's the sort of meta perspective there. But I think you would really be fascinated to know some mind control stuff, and I wanted to put that out real quick. I've become kind of, I'm involved with this international network of amazing people who are getting all of this information out. David Ray Griffin being one of them. But we have an informal network where we share information all the time. Amazing, courageous people who are risking their lives to bring this information to you. And I'm privileged to be a member of that. And I'm considered one of the top experts in that group on mind control. And I guess I'll tell you, many of you here probably don't believe in reincarnation, but I happen to believe in it. And I happen to have a life memory of over 1,000 years ago when I was the chief of a torture chamber. I'm serious. I have that memory. Now, if you don't believe in reincarnation, that's fine, but this is my reality. I did some terrible, terrible things. I was evil. If you knew the things I did. So, why is it that I have the capacity to handle this darkness and still come from this place? Because I went through many lifetimes being a monk, paying my penance, having revenge paid on me and all this sort of stuff to get to where I am today, so that now, and as a kid, by the way, I was fascinated with torture, not wanting to torture things, but always imagining myself being the one tortured and they couldn't break me. Every time I read a book that had stories about somebody who survived torture, tears would be streaming down my eyes. It's like, oh my God, I think I can do it. And then when I got this memory of that past life, I was like, oh my God, all makes sense now. So in my own belief system, maybe we all play the dark and light sometimes. Maybe there are lessons for all of us in all of this. And that's why I have the capacity. Some of the stuff that goes on in mind control is ugly, ugly. I've had many survivors of mind control tell me their stories. And sadly, it involves torture. It involves rape of little children. It involves some of the most heinous things you can imagine. Josef Mengele, the angel of death at Auschwitz, had free rein to torture and kill thousands of people in any way he wanted in order to learn how to control their minds. He perfected, relative to what was before. There was mind control before that, but he perfected in 4 hours. He could take any person here, including me, and break you down into a multiple personality disorder. So as a nurse, I knew what multiple personalities are. The core personality does not know about the other personalities. And part of the healing process is becoming aware of those other personalities. So when Josef Mengele took you and through torture, hypnosis, and drugs, caused you to dissociate from your body, and another personality stepped in, and they would work with that. They would train that personality. They give it code words so that they could access it. 4 hours, he had a Manchurian Candidate. Manchurian Candidate is a spy who doesn't even know they're a spy. And that's when you start understanding the depths. And then you got to realize that all these different factions at the top have control of their own cadre of super spies that are working against each other. And you see how it starts getting complex and strange and bizarre. And so I don't even usually go too deep into this because it can be, especially if there's any survivors in the audience, it can be really traumatic, some of the stuff that goes on. But I just want you to get that we can, every one of us has the capability of being really ugly and really evil. Now, I don't believe in evil in the greater sense of things, but in the subjective sense, there is evil. In the subjective sense, you're there and I'm here. In the greater metaphysical sense, we're all united. But it's important to distinguish that here, I'm talking to you, and you're separate from me, and I'm wanting to inspire you and have you inspire me as well. So every one of us has the capability to be really bad and evil, and it's when we go in and look at those places and deal with them. When I got that lifetime, I had not known a lot of my lifetimes where I thought, oh, maybe I was close to Jesus, or maybe I was some great general. You know, that was what my thinking about reincarnation, because I didn't have memory. And then I got one or two that were different, and then that one came to me. It's like, oh my God, forget all that Jesus and all that stuff. I suddenly got a big piece of myself that I had lost that was like, I did that. And believe me, it was like, I knew. We've all got it in us. But now I can work with it. I have those memories, and believe it or not, my absolutely amazing, most recent girlfriend of 6 years, she's my best friend to this day. I'm fairly certain she was the one that I couldn't break when I was the chief of that torture chamber. We got into this relationship, and both of us acknowledged within weeks, I owe you big time karma. We got this astrological reading just for fun. A friend said, you should do this, 25 bucks, it's all computerized. The astrological reading came back and said, Fred owes Marjorie big time karma. Said, Marjorie, sit back, enjoy it, don't abuse it. Said Fred, get used to it. And so I did. I mean, because we even before getting that astrological reading, we already sensed this. And I ended up having to give her money and help her out, and she had all this stuff. But thankfully, after 3.5 years of both of us working consciously on it, I turned to her one day, I said, I think that karma is just about paid back. And she said, yeah, damn it. She knew too. And we're still best friends today. It's the most amazing relationship I had. So the invitation is just to remember that we can get caught up in all this darkness, all this weirdness, and I have gotten caught up and obsessed with it at times, and I forget what's the bigger picture. And I invite you, if you start exploring this stuff, remember that there is a big picture. Come back, what are your deepest values? Why are you doing this? Why are you exploring this? How can you be most effective in being an invitation to transformation? For me, that's where it's at. That's why I'm here talking to you. I'm going to take one last question here. Yeah.
A lot of the information we've received is from the internet. Can you address the fact that the government has plans to take over the control of the internet?
I guess the only thing I would say about it is don't worry. I happen to know there are other systems ready to go should that happen. I mean, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but you'd be amazed if you knew all the transformative forces going on, even in the military and the CIA. There are incredible light forces, love forces. I talked with a guy who was in deep, dark, black ops, working with dolphins to create transformation. Military intelligence. He's got a website. And, you know, I could tell you so many amazing stories of all these transformative places. Of course, the press isn't going to let you know. The press wants to keep us in fear, the ownership of the press. But the internet now, we have this amazing tool. You can go learn all this stuff. Where are we at time-wise?
Fred, what can you tell us about the white knights that are out there to shift this change, people in government structure and whatnot?
Thank you. How much time?
We're done.
We're done. Okay. All right. It's very important. Just so you know, I so respect this Metaphysical Center. They are awesome. I thank them for inviting me here. And Jordan Pease, who's the overall manager, plays a lot of respect. Just like, let's not use up people's time. So the time's up. I want to honor that. I want to say thank you all so much. I do want to invite one last deep breath of your sacred love flows into me and my sacred love flows out to you. So just invite you to open to that for as much as you can. Thank you for being who you are.